Don't ever knock on my front door. Don't even try it. If you're a salesman, keep stepping. If you're a girl guide, move on to the next house. We don't care if you see us through the window or hear us behind the door. We will never open it. We don't know who we can trust anymore. All we know is that whatever is outside can't enter unless we let it. It all started about a week ago when I was home alone. My wife and boys were spending the week at her mother's place in Perth while I stayed behind, so my boss wouldn't think of my name when our company's downsizing inevitably reached our branch. Reality found me sacrificing my vacation days in hopes of keeping my job. 5 o'clock came and put an end to Monday, and I didn't linger around the office for a second. On my way home, I stopped by my favorite Chinese takeout. Pulling my car into the garage, I quickly changed into comfort wear and settled into my favorite recliner. As I flipped on the TV and opened my takeout, I sighed away the day's stress and prepared to relax. It had been minutes before my peace was interrupted by the loud sound of the doorbell. I rolled my eyes and grumbled to myself when I opened the door. I was met by one of the strangest sights I had ever seen. Before me was a salesman. Not a salesman you might see wandering around modern neighborhoods, dressed in bright polos, khaki shorts, trying to sell you solar panels. No, the salesman before me looked like he had stepped out of the 1960s. He wore perfectly polished formal dress shoes, a light grey tweed suit, and a matching fedora. The man himself was the picture-perfect 1960s man. He was tall and thin, his brown hair was skillfully cut and styled, cleanly shaved, and his teeth were perfectly straight and dazzlingly white. At his side was a very old Hoover vacuum. As our eyes met, he smiled, removed his fedora, and in the quick, yet soothing voice of an old-fashioned baseball announcer, he said, "Good evening, sir. Always a pleasure to see a fellow citizen. I'm here on behalf of the Hoover Company. If I could, I'd like to come inside and take a moment to demonstrate to you the marvels of the modern home vacuum." I couldn't help but chuckle a little. Wow, I said. That's some get-up. I feel sorry for you having to wear that in this heat. Is Hoover celebrating an anniversary or something? The salesman didn't drop the act. "No, sir, nothing special, just the regular Hoover treatment. May I come in?" I squinted my eyes slightly. No. At this, his smile dropped. He stared blankly for a moment before saying, "You won't let me in?" "No." I said again. "Why not?" he asked in a quieter voice. "Look, mate, this is my house and I don't need a reason to not let you in." He stared blankly at me again before whispering, "Please." I could feel my temper getting the best of me. "No." Now get lost. With that, I slammed the door in his face and backed up into the entryway. But through the fogged glass of the front door, I could still see his silhouette just standing there on the porch. I held my breath and stared, hoping he would leave. After about 3 minutes, he hadn't moved, and I lost my temper. I swung the door open and yelled into his wide smile, "Get off my porch right now, or I'm calling the police." He stared. His smile only seemed to widen. After half a minute, he walked backwards off the porch. His eyes never left mine, nor did his smile lower until he reached the sidewalk. At that point, he turned and walked off. I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable, so I locked the front door as I returned to the recliner. I finished my dinner, enjoyed a few hours of TV shows, and headed off to bed. At 1 a.m., the silence of the house was shattered by the doorbell. I don't know how long it had been ringing before it woke me. Barely awake, I stumbled out of bed and into the hallway, praying that this was a dream. Opening the door, the light was blinding, and it took a moment for my sleepy eyes to adjust. As they did, the figure before me spoke in a loud, authoritative voice. "Sir, I'm with the police. We received a complaint from this address earlier today. May I come in and discuss the details?" "Wait, what are you talking about?" "Just following up on the call we received. May I come in and take your statement?" My confused mind began to catch up. I never called the police today. I know for a fact that no one else here did either. The figure was silent for a moment before saying, "All the same, sir, if I could come in, we could clear this all up." It was at this point that I noticed the man's uniform. It was old, the type of uniform worn back in the 80s. In fact, the man's entire appearance was like something out of a police TV show. The worn aviator sunglasses, and his face was home to a thick mustache. I looked at him and asked, "What's your badge number?" He didn't reply. "Do you have a warrant?" "No," came the simple answer. "Then you can't come in. If I had one, would you let me in?" I didn't. Answer just slammed and locked the door. The man banged his fist on the door for minutes before giving up and leaving. And after calming down for about an hour, I finally fell back asleep. When morning came, I found it easy to convince myself that last night's interaction was nothing but an odd dream. I blamed it on the cheap Chinese food. Work was nothing special, just the daily grind of an underpaid accountant for a shrinking company. 5 o'clock came and I didn't linger. Soon I was trapped in the prison of rush hour. It was 6:30 by the time I pulled into my quiet neighborhood. And as I reached my house, I noticed a figure standing on the front porch. It was a man. He was dressed in a light grey jumpsuit, similar to the ones a janitor or plumber might wear. He stood facing the door, one hand was raised and limply yet constantly knocked on the door. No way, I said in disbelief as I passed the front of the house to the garage on the side of the house. As I passed by, the man noticed, and his head slowly turned to me and followed me as I disappeared around the corner. Not again, I muttered aloud. By the time I parked and exited the car, he was already there, standing just outside the open garage door, as if an invisible wall stopped him from coming any closer. "Hello," he said in a cheerful voice. "We received a call earlier about a busted pipe, and no one has answered the door. May I come in and take a look?" I stared at him as he spoke, and not once did I see him blink. A wide smile crossed his face as he finished, as if it was his default expression. "No, no one called you. No one has even been here all day." "So get out of here," I said, somewhat annoyed. Through the gritted teeth of his smile, he said, "So you're here alone?" I swallowed and replied harshly, "That's none of your business, mate. Now leave at..." That as if a switch was flipped, he returned to the expression and movements of a charismatic tradesman. "Really, sir, I must insist. Just let me come in and take a look. Dealing with a flooded basement isn't a relaxing way to spend the evening. No, I must insist that you leave right now. And don't ever come back." His unblinking eyes narrowed at that. The unreal smile returned as he backed away, as he reached the end of my driveway. I heard him quietly say, "See you later," with a loud sigh. I closed the garage door and headed upstairs to change out of my work clothes and shower. I had hoped to grill that night for dinner, but shortly after I got out of the shower it began to rain. Not wanting to give up on my dreams of a good steak, I decided to just leave the grill in the garage, pull out the cars and leave the garage open to let the smoke out. The smell of the cooking meat mixed with the cool, earthy smell of the rain calmed my nerves and made me forget about both work and strange solicitors. Just as the steaks finished, the storm outside became stronger. I noticed a figure running in the heavy rain. It took me a second to realize it was running right towards my garage. It appeared to be a young girl, no older than 12 years old. She ran as fast as she could, but when she reached the threshold of the garage, she stopped instantly. I glared cautiously at her. Even in the rain it was obvious that she was crying. For a moment I let my guard down. I had had many strange visitors over the last few days, but this was just a little girl who needed help. I subconsciously moved closer to the entry of the garage. "Hey, are you okay?" "Do you need help?" I asked. As my fatherly instincts overtook me through sobs and snuffles, she replied weakly, "They're chasing me. They want to hurt me. Please help me." I took another step closer. "Who's chasing you? How can I help?" At that question, a thin grin broke across the girl's face, and she said, "Can I come inside?" "I don't think they will find me if I'm in there." Something in the back of my mind broke through my fatherly concern. Something wasn't right. I stared intently at the little girl's face. Her unblinking eyes gazed back. A chill ran down my back as I realized that I recognized this girl. Everyone in this area knew who she was. This was the Johnson girl. Last summer she was snatched while riding her bike to a friend's house. The whole community searched for weeks. Her devastated parents regularly pleaded with her kidnapper on the local news. At the end of summer her body was found, floating face down in a nearby reservoir. The thing in front of me wore the same clothes the Johnson girl was wearing when her body was found. The fingers of its left hand twitched violently. My throat was dry as I asked, "What are you?" At this, the thing violently titled its head to the side before cheerfully replying through clenched teeth, "I'm a little girl." Instantly, her face dropped. The smile as the facade of a distressed crying girl returned. "And I really need to hide in your house. Please, mister, they'll get me." Cold sweat ran down my forehead as I slowly shook my head no. "Go away," I stuttered. A low growl escaped the little girl's lips as malice filled her eyes. For one terrible second, neither of us moved. Then, in a flash, she lurched towards me, but as she tried to break the plane of the doorway, she froze as if she hit an unseen wall. She screamed, "Let me in," over and over again. She swung her fists forward as if banging on an invisible door. I turned, hit the garage door button, and ran into the house. That night was awful. Whatever was outside my house didn't leave. Instead, it spent the night screaming and banging on every door and window of my house. The scream was angry and primal. With every bang, I feared the windows would shatter or the doors would give out, but they didn't. Even on the second floor, I heard violent bangs and angry screams at my bedroom window. Every now and then, I'd see its shadow under the lights of a passing car. I spent the night huddled in the upstairs bathroom as its violent fit shook the foundation of the house. Morning came, and 30 minutes after sunrise, the banging and screaming stopped. The house seemed quiet. Slowly, I left the bathroom and peered out of the bedroom window. Outside, I saw nothing unusual. Making my way downstairs, I found myself checking every window and door. I saw nothing, not so much as a scratch on the glass or a damaged plant in the yard. Nothing that pointed to the noise from the night before. I didn't want to leave the house. I called my boss, claiming I was sick. I told him I probably won't be in for a few days. Sarcastically, he replied, "I'll remember this in a few months." I didn't care. Being laid off was the least of my concerns. The next few days were a nightmare. Every evening around 7 p.m, a figure would stand on the porch and knock on the door. "Hello? Anyone in there? May I come in? Please." Sometimes it asked in the voice of a little girl's, sometimes it pretended to be the police, or it would speak in the smooth voice of a salesman. It had some new voices too. "May I come in?" asked an elderly woman. "Come on, man. Let me in," said a teenage boy. Sometimes it tried accents, but it always got them wrong. With every passing hour, it grew more angry and more violent. The calm tone slowly grew angry and eventually would scream. The knocking would turn to banging, but every morning, 30 minutes after sunrise, it would stop. I hadn't slept in days. Dread was growing in my mind because I knew soon I had to go out. My wife and sons were flying home. My boys started football practice this coming week and needed to get back in time to be ready, and I was supposed to pick them up from the airport. I knew I couldn't ask my wife to get an Uber. I would never be able to trust that they were real unless I saw them exiting the plane myself. So, with shaking hands, I used the button to open the garage. I stood and watched for a few moments, but no one walked by. After building up some courage, I hopped in my car, closed the garage, and headed off towards the airport. It was so good to see my wife and boys. After several sleepless nights and days of isolation, just their presence was a breath of fresh air. I pulled my wife in for a hug as we separated. She looked me over. "Dear, you look terrible," she said, full of concern. "I'll explain later," I said with a weak smile. "We missed you," she said. On the car ride home, I tried to explain the situation to them. I told them that for the last couple of days, strange people have been trying to get into our house. I'm sure I sounded crazy as I tried to tell them about vacuum salesmen from the 60s or little dead girls. When I told them about the banging and screaming in the night and suggested that maybe we spend a few nights in a hotel. "Are you feeling okay, honey?" My youngest son jokingly said, "Have you been smoking something, Dad?" My wife quickly interjected, "I'm sure you're just stressed and haven't been sleeping. Well, I'll rub your shoulders tonight." I just nodded. After all, they would see what I was talking about at 7. The afternoon moved by slowly as my family unpacked their things. 7 p.m. came, but to my surprise, no strange visitors came with it. It was surprisingly normal. At 8:30, I let out a cautious sigh of relief. Maybe it was gone? Maybe the events of this week were just some sort of prank by the neighbors. I paced around the house till 9:45 when my wife asked if I was coming to bed. Before long, I couldn't keep my weary eyes open any longer, and I drifted off to sleep. In the morning, I felt refreshed. I hadn't slept in days, and that night I slept all the way through with no interruptions. I made my way to the kitchen where I made myself a cup of coffee and some toast, which I enjoyed. A few minutes later, my oldest son came down the stairs and into the kitchen. He looked at me with a big grin on his face. I nodded and said morning. He went to the cupboard to grab a bowl for cereal. As he did with his back towards me, he said, "Hey Dad, why did you need me to let you in last night?"